Go ahead and do this. Great. And Ursula, would you like to kick us off?
I would. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ursula Bischoff. I am with Arcadia Economic Development Corporation. I'm the Director of Public Investing and Innovation, and pleased to be working with CCRP and North Coast Opportunities to host this webinar on CERF. Just a few words of welcome. If you would, please type your name and your organization in the chat so we know who's joined us today. The purpose of our call is really to provide some context and background on CERF, what it is, how we got to the point where we submitted an application for our region, which is comprised of Del Norte, Humboldt, Lake, and Mendocino counties. Provide some basic information about what we know about our economy, who we're going to be focusing on, and how we're going to move forward to meet the goals of this project that the state wants us to conduct. You know, it was a really quick application process. We know that there are a lot of questions about, you know, who was invited to participate, how people can participate in the future. So we'll be answering some of those questions as well. So thank you for joining us today. And without further ado, we'll just move forward. So again, our goals are to review the CERF program requirements, our region's proposed process, the timeline for next steps, and ways you can stay engaged. The Community Economic Resilience Fund was created by an award from the American Rescue Plan Act of $600 million that was moved to the state general fund to provide a lot of flexibility in how the state could use it to stimulate an equitable recovery from the COVID pandemic. We know that there is really uneven access to some of the resources that were offered during the pandemic to help people weather that disruption. We know that the impacts of climate change and, you know, on our water and wildfires are really creating uneven distress in communities across the state. We know that there are limited access to jobs in emerging industries, and we want to make sure that people have access to those jobs. There's a disproportionate representation of BIPOC peoples in low-wage work. And there's been a history of community disinvestment, especially in our rural areas, where folks don't have opportunities to participate in economic growth and prosperity. So the policy goals that the state has set for this work include a real focus on achieving economic equity. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. We're going to focus on producing a sustainable and resilient regional economy that will benefit all peoples across our region. And the state has a goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2030. And so this funding will support progress toward that goal. The specific purpose of CERF is to build an equitable, sustainable, and resilient regional economy as the state transitions to carbon neutrality. When we talk about resilience, we want whatever we build to help our region withstand shocks that can come, you know, from disruptions like wildfires, pandemics, and other economic impacts that we can't foresee. We know that there are shifting talent pools, shifting industries. So what we want is a comprehensive plan that builds on what we already know, that brings together industry and workers to design our future. You know, what are the needs across the supply chain? What are the needs for partnership? What do the jobs need to look like? What training might be needed? What wisdom can we gain from the workers themselves in how we design our future? And so we're going to be looking at jobs and really starting with what we need to do to build pathways into flourishing wage careers. We want to build collaborative problem solving and partnership structures, not just industries and workers, but people from the community, all the service and support organizations that make it possible for workers and employers to thrive. So healthcare, childcare, education, all kinds of resources that really build community strength and economic strength. And we especially, to bring this focus on equity to the table in a meaningful way, want to focus on certain communities where there's been a history of disinvestment. And we'll talk a little bit further about what that means. The CERF program rolls out in 2 phases. The first phase supports planning across the region. And we want to form an inclusive planning and leadership group. And what that means will mean a lot of outreach, a lot of engagement to make sure that the voices from the disinvested communities are centered and able to participate in the process. To further that goal, we want to make sure that decision-making shifts power in ways that are really meaningful to those disinvested communities and impacted workers who don't typically participate in processes like this. And we'll produce a regional plan based on data and community knowledge. Another goal of this plan is to identify projects that are suitable for funding, on a regional scale that everyone will agree can contribute to the goals that we've set out in our CERF proposal. That phase entitles our region to achieve up to $5 million in funding to support that work. And we submitted a proposal for that amount of money, and we'll talk a little bit about what's in that proposal. The second phase of CERF is a little bit of a black box. We don't know what it's going to look like yet. It will involve funding for projects that are supported by our planning process. The program guidelines are still under development. We may get a peek at a draft later this fall. And the proposal opportunity may be released early in 2023. So we're waiting to learn about that part of the process. How our region arrived at this point has been an ongoing dialogue for almost a year now. The state had workshops, it had advanced press on what this program was going to be about. And a group of stakeholders from across the region began to meet last winter, kind of through local networks and a snowballing effort that really pulled about 45 different organizations across the region together to begin to talk about how we might approach a proposal. In late May, shortly before the RFP was released, the request for proposal, RFP, was released, the Humboldt Area and Wild Rivers Foundation started to convene this group of stakeholders more formally to say, well, how should we begin to think about equity? How should we begin to think about who might lead this work and support this work? Who do we need to help us write the proposal? So that discussion produced a smaller nominating committee, and that smaller core group took the lead in helping to identify who would help prepare the proposal and who we might invite to form our initial leadership group, which the state calls a High Road Transition Collaborative. And then at the end of May, the state indeed released the notice of funding. The organizations who are hosting this webinar today were identified by the nominating committee to help lead the CERF effort. And that is Arcadia Economic Development Corporation as the fiscal agent, the California Center for Rural Policy as the regional convener, and North Coast Opportunities working very closely with CCRP on outreach and engagement. These roles are mandated by the state as part of a support team to help the work of the initial leadership group, that High Road Transition Collaborative, move forward smoothly. The CERF Planning Network, this group of larger, or the stakeholders who are all coming to the table to learn about CERF, talk about how we should move forward, help provide feedback on the proposal through the proposal writing phase, continued to meet. And they did provide feedback on our proposal, and we successfully submitted that at the end of July. And now we'll turn it over to the organization to introduce ourselves.
Thank you, Ursula. I'm Amanda Pisani-Hickey. I'm a senior research analyst here at the California Center for Rural Policy, the aspiring convener for this effort. A little bit about us. We're housed on the campus of Cal Poly Humboldt. We've been in existence since 2005, established by a diverse group of community members from across northern counties, Del Norte, Humboldt, Trinity, and Mendocino, who were concerned about the quality of life for rural people in Northern California and sought to serve those special needs with data and research. So we support data-driven decision-making, strategic planning to improve community health and well-being. We do this by providing evaluation research support for continuous quality improvement in projects and systems and programs and collaborations. Highlighting innovative programs and collaborative efforts across our communities and deepening efforts to promote system and policy change. So with that, I'll turn it over to our colleague, Tammy Chandler, to introduce North Coast Opportunities.
Thank you, Amanda. North Coast Opportunities is really proud to be part of this process as the Community Action Agency in Mendocino and Lake County. We've been part of the Community Action Network nationally and statewide since the 1960s to address poverty and improve self-sufficiency in our communities. In the last decade, we've also worked closely with Humboldt and Del Norte to provide senior services, including AmeriCorps senior programs, our Redwood Caregiver Resource Center for seniors, and foster grandparents programs. We also provide caregiver resources and senior services in Sonoma County, Marin, and Napa counties to the south of Mendocino and Lake counties. Certainly our mission as a community action agency aligns very well with the efforts of this CERF project. And our vision in terms of addressing safety and a healthy community really lie on our key values and goals around justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, becoming a community leader in climate change. And certainly that resonates very much with the work that we'll all be doing together in the region on this planning project. And the work that we do around community advocacy, engagement, and services, as well as training and educational opportunities to improve self-sufficiency and opportunities in the region. As a community action agency, we have our core federal funding to address community action goals, and we've leveraged that with over $30 million in grant funding in our region, federal and state grants to support things like rural childcare, Head Start services, food policy. We run our local food hub for Lake and Mendocino County and work closely with North Coast Growers Association north of us. We support farm to school and homeless and housing services, as well as community organizing, advocacy, and disaster response and recovery efforts. We'll be partnering really closely, of course, with CCRP and AEDC for this regional partnership, along with our community action agency partner in Humboldt County, Redwood Community Action Agency, True North Organizing Network in Humboldt and Del Norte, and many, many other community-based organizations and grassroots leaders that will be supporting this planning effort so that we can really engage authentic community voices throughout the plan development over the next 2 years. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Ursula or Amanda.
Hi, folks. As I mentioned, Arcadia Economic Development Corporation has been working in the community here in Humboldt, Del Norte, Lake, Mendocino, Trinity, Siskiyou counties, and Shasta County for over 40 years. We finance opportunity. We carry several federal designations. We are a community development finance institution, an economic development corporation, and a small business lender funded by the Federal Small Business Administration. So we provide a lot of loans and financial support to entrepreneurial, innovative business and community projects to promote prosperity across our service area. We spur economic development through job creation, supporting creation of new businesses, expansion and retention of businesses by providing commercial loans at very competitive interest rates when they can't necessarily be funded by banks. And we run community programs and training that help develop the capacity of individuals, organizations, and communities to grow wealth. We also played a key role in some of the pandemic relief activities, providing the Paycheck Protection Program relief funds, and are an active participant in a lot of the economic development planning processes in the area.
Great, thank you, Ursula and Tammy. I will talk us through a little bit about what we came up with in our proposal, what was submitted to the state. Our proposal is available online, and we'll provide the links so that you can find that information at the end of the webinar. So to fulfill the requirements of the call, there were three main buckets of content that we had to pull together. The first was the concept proposal, which put forward our vision for initial leadership group, the High Road Transition Collaborative, or HRTC. And if you struggle with that acronym, you're not alone. And it also provided a snapshot of what our regional economy has historically been driven by, and what trends we're seeing coming for the future. The second very crucial piece that we pulled together was the outreach and engagement plan, and Tammy will talk us through what's in that in more detail later. But effectively, the methods that will inform, engage, and empower stakeholder participation and offer orientation and training support so that those voices can step into the process and engage from a place of empowerment. Another key component that was a true collaborative effort was the partnership agreement letter. And here I just want to emphasize that the signatories onto that letter, the idea there was really to demonstrate to the state the breadth and depth of support for this collaboration. It's not, the sum total of organizations that will be providing leadership and decision making in this effort, but we were thrilled to have garnered 40 signatures that we put forward. So the Redwood Region-wide vision and goals. The vision for this collaborative is that in the next decade, the Redwood Coast region will become a vibrant, regenerative, and economy catalyzed by the implementation of community-driven innovations and collaborative governance. In order to pursue that vision, we have 4 goals listed here. One is to build economic development capacity to maximize opportunities for growth and effective implementation of projects. And once again, that vision is at the regional level, to create an inclusive and equitable regional economic plan that's aligned with existing plans that have happened in counties and other jurisdictions throughout our region, and is informed by data, community participation, and community priorities. And to increase the diversity of the regional workforce implied in high road occupations by ensuring training and pathways to flourishing wage careers for people historically underrepresented in growth sectors. And once again, not to draw in something that Ursula mentioned there, that we do have, disproportionately our BIPOC and marginalized communities in low wage occupations. And so the vision of this is to change that and provide flourishing wage careers for folks. And then to identify the funding opportunities driven by stakeholder participation in decision-making for the priority projects that can really catalyze that change for our region. An important part of what we had to produce for the state was a snapshot of what our economy looks like now. This analysis of our industry clusters was produced last year, I believe, for Del Norte, Humboldt, Mendocino, Siskiyou, and Trinity. So we are here, our colleagues from Lake County were excluded, and part of the work that is done throughout the planning phase is to provide updated analyses for our region to help inform the plan and inform the stakeholders. So historically, of course, our region has been really driven by natural resource use and agriculture, land-based industries. And in the past decade or so, what's emerged as key growth sectors that we would be exploring opportunities in and is diversified healthcare, management innovation services, building systems and construction, specialty food, flowers, and beverage, and include agriculture writ large there in that representing in that node. Tourism, investment support services as a growing sector of importance, and then historically, of course, forest products and niche manufacturing, which is an industry where we're, of course, seeking climate innovations. Highlight all the exciting development that has occurred across the region that demonstrates forward-looking, sustainable shifts in livelihoods and in our economy. And so we highlighted projects that we saw in blue economy, particularly on the Mendocino coast with the Noyo Harbor Ocean Science Center. Mill site redevelopment planning that's happened in Humboldt and Mendocino County, including one which has been redeveloped into Nordic Aqua Farms or is in the process of, and the Klamath Dam removal and habitat restoration that's occurring further north. For green and regenerative economy projects, the leadership shown in Blue Lake with the microgrid, which has inspired similar projects elsewhere in our region. New offshore development that's occurring in Humboldt Bay, and the access and benefit sharing agreements that are innovative ways to ensure benefit for historically marginalized communities. The Core Hub, with its goal to be the first proven carbon sequestering rural area by 2030 for our region. And Strategic Growth Council regional climate collaboratives that are on the horizon. Broadband, so important as an enabling environment, supportive investment that helps to unlock growth in other sectors. Lake County has a broadband master plan. We have the longest subsea cable coming to Humboldt County next year. Fort Bragg has municipal broadband, and Mendocino County has several other initiatives to expand access. And then arts, leisure, and tourism is a really important industry that creates such a vibrant communities across our region. Lake County Tourism Improvement District, the Great Redwood Trails, an exciting development that's coming, and other arts-focused projects in Mendocino and beyond. And then, of course, disinvested communities are so central, both as beneficiaries and also as participants who will be driving the decision-making in this planning process. The state defines disinvested communities, specific census tracts that have the following attributes. They're identified as disadvantaged by the California EPA. They have income at or below 80% of statewide median household income or designated low income by the Department of Housing and Community Development. They're designated high poverty area or high unemployment area by GoBiz, and all our tribal communities are also included within this operational definition of a disinvested community for the purposes of CERF. But we also want to highlight important groups in our region. We have across our region an aging population, and our seniors have specific needs that should be considered in economic development planning. We do have higher rates of opportunity youth. Those are youth that are between the ages of 16 to 24 who are disengaged from both employment and educational opportunities. We have our tribal communities, farm workers, migrant and otherwise, and of course our BIPOC communities. So I'm sorry, here I need to turn this over to Tammy to walk us through the outreach plan. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, Amanda. No, I appreciate just building on the slide around disinvested communities. We really tried for our initial outreach and engagement plan to really address the dynamic of inclusive planning and shifting the power dynamic, as you heard Ursula and Amanda talk about earlier, as so key to this next phase of planning and development for our region. So one of the very first things, as we hope to be awarded the state funding for this project in the next 60 days, the very first thing that CCRP will be working on, in addition to pulling together the initial leadership team, the High Roads Training Collaborative, is to create a centralized website. Right now, one of our partners has put up a lot of information that, again, Amanda will link you to at the end of this, but we don't yet have a single source for the best regional information. So that's going to start on CCRP's webpage, and Amanda can share that link with you, but right now it doesn't have anything about this project yet, but California Center for Rural Policy will be the hub for an interactive web-based platform that will start to provide this transparent communication loop for the entire region. And very early on as well, we'll be working with outreach and engagement partners around the whole region to develop a multilingual community survey and outreach process to help fill in some of the gaps of who hasn't been involved yet. And that's why we're hosting these web information systems even before we're funded, in order to start to see who should be included and isn't included or informed yet, and how we start to build that as quickly as possible as we look to being funded in the next 2 months. Our second big strategy then builds on that to develop some support structures in each of our 4 counties and have leadership teams at the grassroots local level that can be further translating and communicating that information to local stakeholders and feeding that back into the regional leadership and governance structure. So we certainly are looking at how to build that in a way that does assure that our traditional economic development stakeholders are partnered with disinvested community leaders who really are people and voices that will inform this process and help assure that our economic development strategies of the future really do listen and learn from and rebalance and redistribute power in a way that's fully informed by the diverse voices of our communities throughout the region. And the next slide, Amanda, really goes into our third strategy to address that kind of equity and overcome these traditional power imbalances through making sure that from the very beginning, our members of the High Roads Transition Collaborative at the regional level are informed at with a similar understanding of what we're talking about when we're talking about justice and equity and diversion and inclusion. And that then that training can be replicated throughout the region as more stakeholders come on board. Certainly in our region, the importance, certainly throughout California, but we know in our region, we want to assure that people are informing and making decisions around this planning process, understand tribal sovereignty, cultural humility, that they understand the importance of traditional knowledges in climate change strategies, and how we actually can have a more powerful plan for the future if we're really listening to each other and building on traditional knowledge and local economic development leadership practices so far. One thing that happened just yesterday is that there's also another request for proposal process that's supposed to come out from the state over the next several months that will provide additional funding to our tribal partners. So as we're implementing this regional process where we hope we have strong tribal engagement, and we have had some very effective leadership voices so far, but we have a lot of tribal nations and tribal organizations throughout our 4 counties. So making sure they all have that information and also know how to apply independently for the new tribal funding that the state will release that could further enhance their personal and our collective efforts in the region. Another big strategy for North Coast Opportunities to step into this partnership is around the kind of stakeholder stipends and involvement we want to bring on for local community-based organizations, grassroots organizations, and leaders to really have effective outreach and engagement in all the pockets of our very geographically big and diverse region. So we'll be helping distribute many grants that allow for diverse partners to be involved in both outreach and engagement, as well as part of these planning tables and local and regional governance structures. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we really want to assure that each county leadership team that forms, really we're thinking in the second quarter of our implementation strategy plan, that those trusted local leaders that come together will really be led by, or at a minimum co-led by, our disinvested community leaders, our nonprofit partners, and others who can really, again, help bring a different approach to our economic development planning in the region.
Thank you, Tammy. A key part of the proposal was putting forward a vision for consensus governance across this planning effort. And, you know, this is going to be key to the success of the process. And we didn't want to lock any one particular way of doing things in place before we did some of that outreach and engagement that Tammy was describing, to make sure that you know, we have deep participation in this. And so we've proposed different attributes of what a leadership and a governance structure could look like. And the early months of this planning process, we'll have to focus on coming up with a strategy that'll work and once again inspire that empowered participation. So some ideas that have been put forward is work groups that are focused on different topic areas or industries aligned with CERF goals. Collaborative led by a steering committee, which could be formed by nominees from the work groups. A review caucus comprised of BIPOC members to advise on policy, strategy, and inclusion. That's a technique that's been used in other collaboratives with success. And then local leadership teams from the counties to ensure equitable local representation and decision making. But once again, these are some ideas and still very much being shaped. And to connect back to the partnership agreement letters, we're just so pleased to have gotten the support of so many different organizations across our region. You'll see the headers here: labor, employers, business associations, grassroots, and communities. These groups were stipulated in the call as different categories of stakeholders and rights holders from whom we needed to demonstrate support. And we're delighted to have gotten these 48 signatories on our partnership agreement letter. We have since heard from more groups their interest in participating in this and providing expertise and leadership, or just staying involved. And we're delighted and hope that with increased outreach and engagement, of course, to bring even more folks involved. Timeline. We are now, of course, waiting. We submitted our proposal end of July and are now awaiting the state to hear about, hopefully, our award. That's expected in the coming month or two, with an eye on having contracts finalized and a planning phase kicked off in October. From there, we will be, engaging through spring of 2024 in our planning work. In early 2023, however, the implementation phase solicitation will be opened, which will give us more idea of what kind of a vision we need to put forward so that we can move beyond the planning phase and look at those key investments in our regional economy. And then I just want to highlight those some resources. Of course, as I believe Tammy mentioned, we're still waiting to hear back on our award, and so we haven't been able to. No one is funded to start the process of outreach and creating, a public face for our Redwood Region Rise Slip. But we did have our friends at the West Business Center in Mendocino create a page that has links to our proposal and a webinar explaining more about this effort and a few other resources there that you can go to access those things. The state, of course, has more information on their vision for this, the Community Economic Resilience Fund, CERF. And then I think, Ursula, if you wouldn't mind saying a few words about the Redwood Coast Region Economic Development Summit that's coming up next month.
Sure, thanks, Amanda. AEDC is a proud host and collaborator on the second Redwood Coast Region Economic Development Summit. The first last year was a huge success. It's a virtual summit, but programmed in a very interactive and engaging way. This year's program has involved real planning input from all the counties in our region. And we've got a great roster of speakers on the first day. A lot of keynotes we'll be hearing from political leaders, leaders of our tourism sector and industries, futurists. At the end of day one, each county will be hosting an in-person gathering. So if you've spent the day, gotten really excited, listening to all the speakers, you can actually connect with your colleagues, talk about it, socialize, enjoy yourselves, and a little reception after the first day. The second day, we'll have panels, again, on really great topics. Each panel then will break apart into kind of World Cafe discussion groups, and it'll be a really invigorating way to share information about all the economic development possibilities and priorities that are going on across the region. So please do check out the link here, and we'd love to have you join us.
So, and I'm going to go ahead and stop share and migrate some of those links over into our chat, but we would love to hear from you all. Any questions, comments, or impressions?
So I think I feel a little bit unclear as to how we can actively engage in this. So I'm Nancy Olson. I'm newly at the Eureka Chamber of Commerce, but also with Leadership Redwood Coast. So if you could clarify, like I said, I'm not 100% sure how we as a chamber specifically can be engaged. What are our next steps?
Want to take a stab at that one, Ursula?
Sure, happy to. Sure. Thanks for your question, Nancy, and thanks for being here today. It's nice to see you. Right now, the best way to stay involved is to sign up for more information. Amanda has included the contact information for the Center for Rural Policy. If you just shoot an email there to say that you'd like to be on the mailing list, that's the best way right now to continue to track this effort. We learned from California Forward yesterday in a community of practice meeting for CERF aspiring conveners and fiscal agents that the state is actually going to be in the process of reaching out to regions where there was more than one application to see if they can broker collaborative solutions in those regions. So we might not receive word about awards until sometime in the middle or end of September. That would probably push out our contracting activities until well into October. So it may take a while to get started. We just have to see how much of an award we will receive. We may not receive all that we ask for because not every region will. So we have to decide among ourselves then how we really want to march forward with our work plan, if we need to make any adjustments. We will continue to push out information as we receive it during that time and let everyone know what the next steps are. As Tammy mentioned, one of the first things we will be doing is additional outreach and engagement. And, Amanda mentioned too that the 48 or so organizations that signed letters of support were recruited specifically to fill those categories of participants the state mandated that they wanted to see on our leadership collaborative. We fully expect that there will be many more people invited into that leadership group, invited to participate in whatever work teams are assembled, whatever local leadership teams are assembled. So as we become more clear about our path forward, we'll be publicizing opportunities for participation in different ways from different voices. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Thank you, Ursula. And I'll just reiterate too, now we're really focusing on, shoring up our participation while we wait to hear about that award. And I'll be building out this mailing list as best I can and distributing this information, including this webinar and our slides. And, if you've noticed a colleague that's been missing or is out of the loop, we really appreciate everyone's efforts to get the word out and get them connected. It's really will help move us forward.
Yeah, I was thinking with that, we had such a decentralized kind of so many people involved during the proposal development, and the three of us kind of just came together pretty late in the process. So you may also find we're finding people who maybe attended a meeting early on that a partner or affiliate put on as we were sharing information, but didn't get on this central mailing list. So I really appreciate Amanda taking the lead to get everyone on one mailing list between all the efforts that have happened so far. So I see we both posted that ccrp@humboldt.edu as the best place to go to make sure you and other colleagues stay in that information loop and and help us as we move forward. To our knowledge right now, we are the only proposal in our region, so we don't have to go through the negotiation process that Ursula talked about, but there are many regions across the state. So, and we'll all be rolling out at a similar time period, and I'll be receiving technical assistance and support from various state departments that are involved in this effort as well.
Any other questions or comments? Great. Well, thank you all so much for being with us. I will make sure that everyone gets these materials that we've shared today. And yeah, we look forward to engaging with you all as this process moves forward.